Emmitt, how's it going?
Jake, it's good to see you here, I guess.
Yeah, man, for
But
sure. We
it's been a good minute.
Yeah, for sure. I've been looking forward to this here for a couple weeks now, and your first time land buyer, which is super exciting. And it would have been, I think, two springs ago. Me, you, and Cameron went out and shed hunted, and we walked a bunch and found a bunch of antlers. You were kind enough to take us out and walk a bunch of different pieces, and that was a lot of fun. And but before we get into all that, go ahead and introduce yourself for people who haven't ran across your YouTube channel before.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Emmitt Enyeart. I absolutely love hunting, deer hunting, shed hunting, and turkey hunting. I've got a YouTube channel called Extreme Element Outdoors where I document some of those experiences I have in the outdoors. I live here in Southeast Iowa. I'm 27 years old. Had to think about that for a second. It's a little weird, but nope. I was born in Pennsylvania. I've lived in 5 different states growing up. I call my hometown DeWitt, Iowa. And just after living in a couple different states, I got to experience a couple different places. And Iowa really seemed to be the place that I liked the most. So that's kind of where I was like, you know what, I wouldn't mind, staying here, raising a family, and
Mhm.
trying to set up shop here in Iowa. So that all worked out perfectly because I ended up, really enjoying the hobby of hunting, and it's one of the best states for deer hunting. So
Yeah, and I forgot to
yeah,
mention
here we
too,
are.
we did a whitetail cribs at your parents' house, and I remember the basement was just really cool. So many all the shed antlers, some giants that you found over the years, and you guys are no strangers of knocking down some super respectable deer as well. And I know your little brother smoked a giant um, earlier this season, so I just want to hear like the quick story on that because it's worth noting.
Yeah, no, it's that was a really cool story. So it was his last youth season. So in Iowa, the youth season, it's you get 2 weeks basically before the regular bow season comes in, where you can take the youth out. So it was his last year that he was eligible for that season. We had some target bucks that we were excited about hunting, early going into this year. Well, unfortunately, we got hit hard with the HD, so a lot of those target bucks, you know, disappeared. Found a couple of them, and long story short, we had to make some adjustments. So we ended up going down and hunting um, about an hour from where we live. Went into a spot that was on a good food source. Um, had a stand hung on that food source for a north wind, or I'm sorry, a south wind, because it was early in the year. Well, it was a north wind the evening that we went in to do the hunt, and so we took 2 stands and we did a hanging hunt on the south end of that field. And on our way in, we were like, we're like, oh, well, it's definitely good that we, brought our stands with us because the other stand that we had hung was stolen.
Oh, jeez.
So it, it wasn't like we were going to hunt that stand, but it was like, it adds to a knowing that we ended up getting a deer that night, a really nice deer that night. It just makes it that much
Yeah,
better.
your
Anyways,
point,
yeah, we did a
like
hanging hunt.
it adds like a layer of tarnish to the hunt. Like like what else has been happening out here since we've been here last?
Exactly. You go into it, you're like, oh man, this is a great start to the evening. And yeah, no. So we did a hanging hunt for the right wind that evening. We were set up on an alfalfa field. A couple deer came out early. It's just like a couple does were out there. It was about an hour before dark, and my little brother, just because of the way it was set up, I was sitting above him. He goes like, "Hey, Emmett, there's a nice deer out there in the field. There's a really nice buck." And I look out, and there was like 4 does, and then there was one buck that was already on the field, and it was like a just a young 8 point. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, I mean, that's a really nice deer. And Easton's like, he's been very privileged to shoot some really nice deer in his past. So like when I actually picked up what deer he was talking about because it was behind a branch, I'm like, whoo, like that is an absolute giant, like biggest deer I've seen on the hoof in my life. It's about 150 yards out. And so like I know this, my heart starts just pumping out of my chest. And I'm like, yo, Easton, that's a nice deer. But I like immediately I'm just like, Easton, you've shot deer nicer than that. But that's one that you're not going to want to pass. And I'm telling him that because I'm hoping that he's not like, if I'm like, Easton, that is the biggest deer that I've ever seen. It's going to
Uh-huh.
get him all razzled.
Yep.
And this deer is at 150 and he's making his, he's not um, spooked or anything, but he's feeding away from us.
Hmm.
So I didn't think he was gonna get any closer. So he ended up setting up on it, taking a shot. We were pretty confident that he hit it, but we couldn't find any blood. We're both colorblind. So we backed out that night, came back with my dad the next morning, could not find any blood, but we were both very confident that he hit it.
Did you
Did
get it
some
on?
grid searching.
Did you get the shot on film?
So the interesting part with this is that uh, s- it was shot inside um, a spot where you could not film.
Okay.
So it's basically what I would consider privileged private ground, where it's
Mhm.
like 20,000 acres. They allow, which about 12,000 acres of it's huntable, but they allow 300 hunters in every year. Um, and it gets pressured very heavily, but you can't run trail cameras and you can't film in there just because it's on
Sure.
federal ground.
Mhm.
Anyways, so no, didn't have that. Um, that would have made it a lot easier. So it was all like off a gut feel. It would also made it easier if it was just on regular ground because you could have called in a dog for blood tracking purposes. But we had to make do with the situation it was. Um, so we grid searched, and we're just, every hour that passes, we're not finding any blood, we're not finding the deer. And you're just like, okay, we're slowly getting to the point that, yep, this deer's not dead. You're starting to think the worst.
Mhm.
Um, we did some thorough grid searching, and then basically we came back to the spot that he ran into the woods, and we're like, dude, they're we're like, Easton, we're just gonna do one more grid search in this area, and then we're gonna work our way back to the truck. We go and grid search that last area on our way through. I couldn't believe it, but I walked up on a white tummy or white belly, just like laying in this multiflora rose bush. I couldn't believe it. Um, I didn't even have the energy to like yell out. I just was like, "Oh my gosh!" And then they were both close enough that they heard me.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it was pretty exciting. It was pretty
That's r
exciting. He ended up They came running over. It was awesome. It was really cool.
Did you
But yeah,
was the shot where you guys thought it was, or I'm just curious with, like, the lack of blood, I know
yeah.
I think that's a good part of the story.
So we yeah, because it was a muzzleloader, and we didn't, bleed that much. At least with this muzzleloader that we used in the past, this isn't the first time that's happened, but it was hit high and back, so it was hit further back than what we wanted. Um, and I think because it was just above that center line and it didn't get full pass through, it just did not bleed. I mean, there was probably a couple drops, but
Mhm.
not enough that you could have trailed it. Um, but it was really cool. It
That's
was
awesome.
a really cool deer, really cool story, really cool circumstances.
What a way to
It
finish
was
up.
funny.
Go ahead. What a funny way, like, what an awesome way to finish up your youth season hunting for your brother. Like, what a way to end with a
Yeah,
bang.
exactly. Exactly. No, it was a great story.
And you
Um,
and
just
you I'm
go
sorry to
ahead.
interrupt. No, I was just saying you knocked one down too, with a muzzleloader too this year, right?
Yep, yep. An early muzzleloader. I ended up shooting one. It was a deer that actually I've only had 2 years of history with because it's the second year hunting that farm, but it was a really cool deer. It's the deer that I wanted to shoot in the early muzzleloader season. There wasn't many mature ones left in the area. Um, he was one of like two that were in that area, and I just got lucky that he came out. Made a plan. Did everything that I thought was right, but we do that every time, right? Everybody does that, and it it just happened to work out for me. So I was very lucky.
Yeah. What's so you chose early season versus late season muzzleloader. Do you always do that? And I guess my next question would be why is that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jake. So I started doing early season because I've got um, the late season is great for if you're hunting over a food source. And the areas that I can hunt food sources, there's a lot of other people that like to hunt them as well. So for example, like my dad will have some of his friends come out um, on the farms that we can actually put food sources in. So with that said, it's just the amount of activity there on the food sources during the late season. I used to hunt the late season, but I was like, you know what? I'll just start hunting the early season, and then I can go out and film everybody else during the late season
Mhm.
instead of, you know, having too many cooks in the kitchen in the late season. Now I can diversify the activity throughout the year.
Mhm. That makes sense.
So
So yeah, I wish it was an Iowa resident. I can make that decision. But I always like asking guys that have that opportunity and why they choose the October one or the late season muzzleloader, because they both seem like such an awesome opportunity with the muzzleloader during that time of year.
yeah, yeah, the early muzzleloader. The only thing that sucks about the early muzzleloader season, the only reason that you'll find that people typically won't pick the early muzzleloader season in Iowa for residents is because you can't hunt any other gun season after you get an early muzzleloader tag. That might change. I mean, now that I'm a landowner, I can do a landowner's early muzzleloader tag, but as just a regular resident, if I do an early muzzleloader tag, I can't shotgun hunt or late muzzleloader hunt. Where if I did late muzzleloader, I could still party hunt during the shotgun season.
Okay.
So it kind of like it takes away from that, and then also the early season can be really tough. You know, just second, third week of October, you got to be on the right food source. Conditions has to be right, and
Hmm.
you're putting a lot of where the late season you got a couple weeks. The early season you only have 1 week, so you're kind of hoping that things line up for you in the early season. But if you have the right food source, you have the right buck to hunt, and you have the right conditions, it can be, in my opinion, the most deadly season.
Yeah. What's your favorite food source for that early muzzleloader season?
I really like. Um, I've had a lot of success with alfalfa in that season, or at least seeing a lot of activity on alfalfa. Um, I think if you can hunt over, brass, because anything really green at that point is really good. Um, I know people have a lot of success on corn too. Actually, 2 years ago, we had a like half acre or acre section of corn that was mowed during that part of the year. That was really good.
Hmm.
It just sometimes that kind of overlaps when some of the other farmers are combining the corn, and so if you do happen to have it where, like, let's say the neighboring farmer has the corn combine, there's gonna be a bunch of fresh corn out in that field where the corn that you're hunting over might not be as attractive, or there's no real difference to it.
Hmm.
Um, so I would say alfalfas and greens, radishes, um, clover. Clover seems to be really good. Um, yeah, it's kind of
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned you're a landowner now, so how does that feel to say that?
dude. It feels weird. Like I'm super excited about it. It just feels like it still feels surreal. Like it's so exciting.
Yeah.
I I
So
don't know. It's a dream come true.
how long has it been a dream for you?
So it's really only been a dream for, like, I would say, like, past 5 years, 5, 6 years. Kind of started when my dad bought a farm about 6 or 7 years ago, and then from there, just after he bought it, I kind of just took to it and started doing projects and other things, and just immersing myself in activities on his farm. And it was like, it is a dream of mine to buy a piece of land for myself,
Hmm.
like to actually become the owner. That would be the ultimate dream. Um, and it just kind of stemmed from him buying that original piece,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
because I
definitely.
really didn't know what there was there, what the opportunities were, like what it wasn't a goal or anything like that, because I wasn't really aware of it
Mhm.
until it's kind of a weird way to put it.
Yeah, so once you knew all the fun and all the opportunities and all the benefits that come with the land ownership, once your dad bought something, you're like, man, I want something like this someday. Yeah, that's really cool. And something I always like to ask, because I think it's a good frame of reference. What do you? So you're 27 years old. You bought your first farm, and what do you do for work? Are you a brain surgeon, or I mean, what do you do? I'm just kidding.
I wish. I wish. I'm not that smart. No. Was what I do for a living. I currently work as a project manager or a project engineer for Cargill, and I've been doing that for about a year now. And for the first 3 years out of school, I worked as a manufacturing engineer. Um, so yeah, I basically studied mechanical engineering, and I've been using that in practice for the past 4 or 5 years.
Mhm. And so, I mean, you're relative to when people buy the first farm, you're kind of early on the bell curve. And so I think it's a really good example. So, like, what were some things that you were doing for the last 3 years professionally to get in a position where you could end up buying a parcel? Whether it was saving tactics or whatever you had to do to create margin in your life in order to buy your first farm.
Absolutely. So, no, because I had that goal so early on, it was more of just saving incrementally and then keeping that money accessible. And then also kind of getting my what is now wife on board. It was something that this had to be like a mutual
Hmm.
um, agreement, obviously, with a decision this big. So we had talked about it for a while. Had both been saving, and it just worked out where we didn't know what we didn't know, but things ended up working out in our favor. And I say that because of the way it's financed, um, which basically one of the things I always had thought was that you need like 20% down for land. So it was always kind of like a turn off, like, oh, like 20% down, to get a big chunk of ground. It's like, holy cow, that's overwhelming to think about. But we had been looking essentially we had been saving up for not just necessarily a piece of land, but we had been saving up for what would be a house and a piece of land. And it wasn't like to be as big as what we actually ended up getting. But we both came to an agreement that we want to invest in something and then potentially build on it here in the future.
Hmm.
So I know that doesn't really answer your question, but there isn't really like any particular saving tactics. It was just more of understanding of, we have a goal, and whether it's to buy a house with 20 acres or to buy a 60-acre piece in the meantime, and then save up again for to build on it in the future.
Hmm.
Um, we knew that that's what we wanted to do,
Hmm.
and that's kind of where we would, part partial off money
Hmm.
as best seen fit. And also, like for example, when we just had our wedding, like all of our like for the registry, for example, we didn't ask for like any specific gifts. Like we asked, it this is kind of weird, but we basically said money for
Give
the
us give us
house or
cash.
land.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's really what it went towards.
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
um, those are some. It just that was our end goal and ended up working out.
Yeah, did you guys have to make any? I mean, I think there had to be some level. Would you consider yourself a frugal person at heart, or like I feel like there had to be some level of frugality to save up, over that time, or what sacrifices did you have to make, or what did you forego that maybe you wanted to buy that you didn't because you're like, no, we need to save this money for a house or for or a piece of ground that you end up buying.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, there's a lot of things. We not very materialistic. We really only spend money on what we absolutely have to. And obviously, for example, Emmy's been driving a car that is reliable. It works, but it's not the brand new one. It's not something that we could have upgraded like 2 or 3 years ago, but we understood that what we have is reliable. It works. And for example, what we're doing now is my dad has a shop on one of his farms. Um, so it's just a shop. It's got a bedroom and a bathroom, or two bedrooms and a bathroom, no kitchen. But this is where we've been living for the past year, and we're going to probably continue to live for at least another 2 years to continue to build on this piece of ground that we bought. So that's kind of that's one of the examples of where we're cutting costs. We yeah, I would say that's where
Yeah,
we're cutting costs.
that's a huge one. Yeah, and so so you guys have saved up some money and you're thinking, well, maybe we'll buy a house and some acreage or maybe buy a piece and end up building on it. How long were you guys shopping? Or I guess how many different pieces did you walk? I know you walk a ton of pieces because I know you shed hunt a lot, but like for with your buyer's hat on of like, okay, we might be interested in buying this. When did you decide you wanted to buy something and how many farms did you walk, or kind of just give the story or background on that?
Yeah, no, it's we were in the market probably, I would say we were in the market probably for 6 months, but we weren't aggressively looking up until like 2 months before. Um, it happened. When I say 6 months, that's when we were like starting to, figure out what our price range would be, where we would be comfortable, really starting to play around with numbers. And then when we got about 2 months in, that's when it was like, okay, let's put some bugs in some realtors' ears. Let's uh let's let it be known that we are aggressively looking. And so
Mhm.
if something comes up that's right, we'll be out there to look. And honestly, Jake, there wasn't we honestly didn't put boots on the ground for too many of them. I mean, a lot of them we can make our judgment on the aerial, the location,
Mhm.
and if it seemed to be the right fit. This one definitely had a lot of the characteristics that we were looking for, which is why we became very serious about it. And it was the only one that we put boots on the ground with.
Mhm.
There was a couple we wanted to put boots on the ground on, but they just sold so fast.
Yeah.
Right when it hit the market, just gone the next day, cash.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing, and it's like arguably some people could say there's been a little bit of a slowdown, but like the good stuff has and forever will sell fast. I mean, that's just kind of how it works. And there's a lot of money out there, whether people realize it or not. And there's a lot of people that are looking for, like a very ideal parcel, and they go fast. And so, what I found interesting is I think it's very unique for a buyer to buy their first farm at auction. So, um, and I think that's a very interesting perspective on this because typically buyers at auctions, maybe they've already bought some, or maybe they kind of been through the ringer before, I guess is the best way to say that. And so when you show up to an auction and hey, you're the winning bidder, it's like you have to have your finances in line. There's no cold feet. You got to put a good chunk down, usually 10% of the purchase price at the day at auction, write a check. And how nerve wracking was that part of it? And I know I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but it's a unique perspective that we haven't had someone on here talk about buying their first farm at auction.
Yeah, no, honestly, it's a great question because it's not something that I anticipate. Like, I didn't think much about it until I was there in the moment, and it was like, holy cow, this is like you said, nerve wracking. Like, um, just heart pounding out of your chest because the auctioneer starts going, they're yelling out numbers, and you're not talking about like 50, $100. You're talking about like obviously a life commitment here, and it's things are happening fast. So going into it, we knew kind of where we were at. I mean, I had an idea of what our maximum would be. We had agreed on what our maximum would be, and then with the financing that we went through, our maximum rate before the auction started, we were like, oh, we can go a little bit higher than this. Um, and then when the auction hit, I mean, everything just happened so fast. Um, gosh,
So let's break this down. So you guys, well, first off, you did the most important thing. You went and got pre-approved. You knew where you're at with your finances, and you talked to a lender, and I assume walked through a couple examples of like this is what we're hoping to buy for at auction. What would be our payment? And they give you a spitball number, and they're like, you might be good to go up to this number. And you're like, okay. So was that kind of how that process went?
yeah, yeah. So basically, we had been approved up to a certain amount, um, and then we'd applied for the first time farmer loan
Hmm.
through the farm service agency, and when that got approved, because that didn't get we got approved through our like through our main lender, but the farm service agency loan did not get approved until like 3 days before. So once we got that financing approved, it was like, okay, we can bump this maximum up a little bit because of how that's financed. It's more beneficial.
So yeah, break that down. So why did you exhaust both avenues, and what did you end up doing, and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the financing, what we ended up doing was first time farmers loan. It's not applicable to everybody, but it is, there's a criteria that has to be met. And just from, the fortunate experiences I've been able to have in my life, I was able to meet some of those criteria. For example, making business decisions on a farm that I don't personally own, but my dad does. So making business decisions on that, I had to provide proof for that. So basically, get letter of recommendations from local co-ops, seed dealers, etc. Provide those with my application, as well as I had a couple of the other requirements that were on the criteria list.
Hmm.
And basically, the Farm Service Agency has this first time farmers loan to help finance people who are wanting to start off farming. So at this particular piece of ground that we were looking to buy, it wasn't like 100% recreational. It was about half tillable, half timber. So basically, put together a plan of how we were going to farm it for years to come, and then submitted that with our application. And the FSA, approved it. And what that means is when they approve it, I was able to the way they finance, their interest rates are much more better
Yeah.
than what some of the other lenders are. And with interest rates being relatively high, or they still are relatively high, but they were even higher at the time of when we were looking for financing. Um, that made it very nice because
That payment was a lot lower than the first quote at the
a
first one.
lot lower.
Yeah. Those a
Yeah.
point or
So with
two
the
makes a big difference.
Absolutely. So the financing with the FSA, they've got three different options for first time farmers. Because we were able to finance through another lender, they only allowed us to do one of the options. But like they do have an option to have it 100% financed through the FSA, which had it was like 5% over 20 years, and then there was 50%, where the FSA would do 50% for 20 years, and that was like 3.5%. And then they have a option that's, you provide 5% down, the FSA will finance 45% of it, and then another lender will finance 50% of it.
Mhm.
But the caveat with that option is that the second lender has to have their loan terms for 30 years, which does kind of suck, but it's it's in place for a good reason and actually ends up making the monthly payments a lot more reasonable.
Mhm.
Um, so
What option did
the FSA really did help.
what option did you
Go
guys
ahead.
go with of those options?
So because we were already approved with Farm Credit Services, they said that we would have to go with the option of the 545.50.
Mhm.
Um, they wouldn't be willing to finance the entire thing, so that's what we did, and it worked out really nice because that 45% that they finance, it's a 1.5% interest rate, which is
Wow.
just like,
Free money, literally.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh, that's so awesome. And so it really, it's really cool that that was an option. And I didn't even know that was a thing. I really didn't. I know that people talked about it. I have a couple buddies um, who I had talked to about, and like, they mentioned it, drinking a beer one time, and it's just like
Mhm.
never really paid much attention to it. Did a lot of googling, a lot of phone calls, talking to the local FSA office or USDA office, and um, yeah, it was just something that I really wasn't much aware of, and I'm glad I learned about it before all this because I can see where some people, don't realize that's a thing and they might have been um,
Stuck with thinking
qualified.
20% down or 25% down. What, did you have to have a Schedule F for for the farming, or was it just a letter of recommendations that you needed?
No, I didn't need a Schedule F. Um, that was Farm Credit Service initially thought that I did need that, but that actually was not something I ended up needing
Oh,
for
wow.
um, the application.
So just by being involved on the farm and having those letters of recommendation,
The
satisfied that requirement.
Yep, basically got a letter of recommendations from those local co-ops, and then also have um, a my current job is heavily there's a lot of financial management that's based with it. So that is also like one of the checks on the criteria is like having I can't remember the exact verbiage from it, but it's like having a job that where you're managing finances,
Mhm.
you know, where you're familiar with it.
Yeah. That's huge. I think
Dude, huge.
that pays dividends for doing your due diligence and exhausting all options too. Because I think a lot of people get discouraged just throughout the land buying process where they call, maybe they make 2 or 3 phone calls and they get 3 answers they're not really happy with, and, man, this is unattainable, I'll never get to that. But what you just laid out is a very attainable thing if people lay the foundation in order to, okay, I need to get, in this case, get hold of the farm and learn the process and call your FSA office and understand your options. And I think that's such a huge thing. And you're right. You can Google that. And unfortunately, you're not going to get the most crystal clear information because I've Googled it.
Mm-mm.
And we had a lender on that specialized that from Missouri. I think it was early last year, like early 2023, and that was a podcast that a lot of people had really good feedback on. And I still felt like we just scratched the surface. So your explanation of that process was definitely really good. So you decided to go that route prior to the day of auction, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So
Yep. We found out that the FSA approved it like 2 days before. I mean, we still had um, approval up to a certain amount with the original lender, which had been fully um, FCS. But once we found out that the FSA approved it, um, our maximum going into that day was a little bit more we were more comfortable to push that maximum.
yeah, with that interest rate, because I mean, unless someone was buying cash, I mean, most people were probably at that time. This was in October, right? Like early October, probably looking at like seven and
Hmm.
a half, 8.5% interest, and then you look
Yep.
at your weighted average of interest was way lower than that. Like it was like you were still in 2021, and everyone else was competing in 2023 interest rates, which is, I mean, was an advantage.
Yeah. Oh, totally, totally. And another nice thing about it, right, is when interest rates are low, things are flying off the market. It is so hard to see, to have options. When it was 2021, it was so hard to find a like good piece of property because it wouldn't even be listed for that many days. It'd be already off the market. People, um, land agents, realtors. I mean, they had, from my understanding, and you would know this better than me, Jake. From my understanding, they had lists of people just waiting with money, ready to buy
Mhm.
because of how fluid everything was and how low the interest rates were. Now we're at a time, or in October, we were at a time where the interest rates were higher, so things started to stabilize, and it allowed us to wait and pick the right opportunity, and then being able to use the effort, not use, but the
Leverage the government assistance, essentially.
yeah, to be able to you know use the lower interest rates at that time was super beneficial,
Mhm.
and it totally aligns with our end goals. So, um, very lucky for that.
Yeah, what a that's the thing. People. This is such an important step that you're sharing. That I just want to drive home because people think buying land is just looking on Land Watch and finding sweet farms, but this is the difference of going into an auction and buying it and saying, "Oh, I should have been a little bit more prepared," or they get the mentality like, "Oh, that's crazy price. I'm never gonna be able to catch up to the land market." But this is a really good story just to show that, hey, yeah, there's options out here. Go, like, if you really want it hard enough, exhaust all efforts because there's probably something there. And obviously, you guys were diligent throughout that process leading up to that. But so that was kind of the process pre-auction. And what exactly were you guys looking for? Were you looking for obviously a good building site, from what I understand? Um, some income, obviously, in this scenario. But how you're a deer hunter at heart, so I have to ask: was that like the neighborhood, or like was the hunting, like how much did that weigh into this decision process?
No, it's a great question, Jake, because yep, I do love the deer hunt, and if it was completely up to me, that might have weighed heavier on it than than what it did. But because this was a mutual decision between my wife and I, there was a lot of other things that we factored into it. I did not overlook the deer hunting on it. It definitely had some things that I really liked about it. But some of the things that we looked for, because this is a life decision for both of us, is we wanted it to be in an area that had a good community where, like, in the future, if we raised a family, it'd be somewhere where we'd want to send our possibly send kids to school, have a good building site, being in an area that we have like good neighbors, somewhere that we'd want to build, that we would it it's somewhere that we would be comfortable living, right?
Mhm.
Are we willing to, you make that investment? Are you willing to set up shop and possibly live there the rest of your life? So it had to have that sense of comfort or homey feel
Mhm.
in a way that we were looking for. Um, and then yeah, there was a couple other things that, like, deer hunting, yeah, like, okay, if it has this, I'm gonna give it a little bit of a boost here and say, I like this one a little bit more. But
Sure.
no, there was some, like, pieces of land that came up for sale that, like, were not in an area that we were, um, we had agreed on, that I would say, as far as deer hunting goes, would have been, like, some of the top notch pieces of land, but it's not fully my decision, and even if it was, it wouldn't align with necessarily what we were looking for, or
Sure.
to make a commitment like that, I wouldn't fully do it on just deer hunting.
How familiar were you with the neighborhood pre-purchase? Was this something that you did know some neighbors here, or just did some calling around after you were interested in it?
No, actually, it's a great question, because we were familiar with the neighborhood because through a family friend that we had a pretty good relationship with, or have a pretty good relationship with, and it actually, their family like has land right in that area, and they were the ones who showed us this piece of land, because initially there was another piece of land that came up for sale in that area. We were super excited about it, but it's one of those opportunities that I was telling you about where it just
You're a
everything
dog.
seemed to be right. We were about to put boots on the ground, and it wasn't even on the website for a day, and it already sold cash.
Mhm.
Uh, so after that, I mean, I think it sent a message to that family that, hey, we are really serious about it. So they were keeping an eye out, and they ended up finding out that this piece of land was coming up for auction. I think we might have been able to find it. We would probably heard about it organically, but they were definitely the ones that kind of put it on our radar at first, and we were super excited about it because you know I got to know this guy, and he's a great guy, and he also like toured me around the neighborhood. He just made it really feel like home. So it just like really added a level of, what's the right word for it?
I assume just a layer of clarity because you felt like you kind of knew what you were getting into, and then obviously having a contact in the
Exactly.
neighborhood. If you're going to build a house there, like they're inherently going to be your neighbors, and people are going to wave to you in the front yard.
Absolutely. And then there was another thing, and there was just a lot of positives with it. Outside that was a big thing that was like, okay, that really adds a pro to this piece that would be coming up, and then also just like some of the things we talked about, where it was in a great community, where it'd be something that we could see us sending our kids to school to. Um, yeah, there's a couple other things too, that we looked at. There's, for example, in my field, there's, I would say, two of the best employers in Iowa are within, very close proximity. Um, so future job opportunities are very close. Um, one of which I'm currently employed with.
Mhm.
Um, and so, those things add up too, right? Like, it's only 10 minutes from where I currently work. I mean, that is a huge benefit,
That's awesome.
because like you were asking earlier about like what sacrifices are you making? Like we're driving I'm driving 50 minutes to work every day right now,
Mhm.
which isn't a big thing. I mean, that's a lot of people do that, but you know, to have something that would be 10 minutes,
Oh, yeah,
uh,
buy
you
a
know,
lot of time back to your life just by having a
yeah,
10-minute commute each way versus 50. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I have to say, like, all right, so you have your pre-approval, you have your financing, you know this is a piece that you guys potentially want to buy if it falls within the range of what you guys are willing to spend. So going into that auction, you're right. You mentioned your heart's pounding and there's everyone shouting and yeah, it's like they cultivate the best environment to get you excited, and
oh yeah,
that's not by mistake. And I love a good auction. I like just to go to auctions and sit there, and I have no interest in buying just because I just love the art of a good auction. So um, tell us kind of like the day of. You have your plan. You guys are sitting there. They're opening up the auction. Like I want to hear
yeah.
all the details.
Yeah, no, so it's funny because like you've been through this. I can clearly tell that you've been through this like too many times, that clearly know the process, because like talking to you now, I wish I'd have talked to you before that day. But anyways, yeah, so going into it, like my wife was totally nervous about it beforehand. Um, like I'd say a week, 2 weeks before, she was asking all antsy about it. I really didn't get nervous until we were sitting in the parking lot like 20 minutes before, and I'm like, oh yeah, now I'm starting to feel some butterflies. I'm like, I don't know why, because I was like totally like cool, collect before. I'm like, okay, if we don't, if it goes above our maximum, something else will come up. We'll find the right thing. We don't need to brush anything. And then we go in, and now I'm getting really anxious, and I'm like in we got to meet like the current landowners, and we're just sitting there like we're analyzing the room. And one thing we did wrong is we sat in the very front, so we couldn't see who was bidding. Not that it had a big impact, but
Uh-huh.
like just trying to read the room. We were in the very front. We couldn't, look at anybody else that was going on. And
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, the the environment that took place from there forward was pretty heart pounding. I mean, they just, the auctioneers are, their interest is for the seller, and they do a really good job for that. But it,
Mhm.
it creates an environment that's very creates a lot of anxiety. And I could see where this wouldn't have happened with me, but I could definitely see where you'd have sometimes where you could have somebody who looks at another person in an auction and it's like, I don't want that person to win it.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden they end up making stupid decisions, like driving like committing to things that they weren't planning on because they were just, so caught up in the moment.
Yeah.
Um, Luckily that wasn't us. And it ended up like, so we ended up like my initial maximum was 6,200. I said I was going to go 6,200 an acre, 400 once we got the
Mhm.
FSA approved, 6,400 an acre. And after talking to, some people going into it, I was actually thinking it might go for like 59, 5,800.
Mhm.
But man, it flew. Like it started to fly up those numbers. I mean, they started off at like 3,000 an acre in
Yeah.
$500 increments, and then finally it starts to slow down, and it shot right up to 6,200 an acre. And I'm like sitting there, I'm like biting my tongue, and
Had you bid yet when it got to
for how
62?
fast
So, at
I bid
like
one time before that.
okay, all right. So you bid one time, then it gets to 62. It starts to slow down. Did they take a
Or
recess at
no, I'm
60?
sorry, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm sorry. I did bid like 2 times, like, it was like I bid one time early at, like, say, like 5,200 an acre,
Mhm.
and then I ended up it got down to me, and I think it was one other guy I couldn't see, um, and I think that it was like 6,000. I went 6,000, he went 6,100, or opposite,
Mhm.
where basically he went 6,000, I went 6,100, he went 6,200, and then I sat there and waited a while, um, let the auctioneer, push it for a little bit, and then they broke it down to 50s at that point and it went to 62.50. And then for how fast it got there, it just stopped like that,
Yep.
and all of a sudden it was one. It was like that. So that guy's maximum was 6,200, which is pretty crazy because like I was like, that was our initial maximum going into it.
Yeah.
Um,
So
so
you got it for 62.50. So it screeching halt at 62. You go into 62.50, and then probably a
it was just
recess, and then it
done.
sold. Wow.
Well, actually recessed at like 5,000, somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000. It recessed there.
Mhm.
And then the auctioneer announced that the farm would be sold because they had the
Reserve.
seller had a minimum.
Yep.
But it was really cool. Like we got to meet the landowner after it, and they're going to be. I mean, they're actually still going to be neighbors, and they are great people. Just added assurance that this was the right decision. It almost just felt like family right off the bat. They were just so welcoming. Um, yeah, it was a crazy morning.
Yeah. So was there a 10% deposit on the day of auction, or was there just a flat? So with you putting 5% down with a 10% deposit at auction, if you don't mind me asking, did you end up getting like a credit at closing for the additional five?
No, I could have. We could have done a credit for 5, but we actually ended up doing like 10% down anyways because that's what we had to have that day of the auction.
Mhm.
Um, the FSA would have, the option would have been the FSA could have credited us back 5%. But regardless of how much we put down, the FSA was still going to do 45% of the purchase price. So like it totally made sense for us to keep that 10% down because we didn't have like an immediate house that we were like, oh, we really want the house. We didn't need the cash in hand right now.
Mhm.
We're completely fine going another 2 years um, with what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And then, building up a down payment for building something or potentially another house that's close in the area.
Yeah, man, what a trip that had to be. And so, okay, you got it. You guys are the winning bidders. Congratulations. And then the deposit to the contract, and then throughout that process, how was the loan process once you had it under contract and you had it kind of bounce the loan process? Was there any snags or hiccups throughout the closing that happened that may be useful for someone else to hear?
Um, so the closing was initially scheduled for like the auction was on like October uh 6th, let's just say the beginning of October, right? The first week of October, and the closing was scheduled for like the third week in November, and we didn't close till the actually like the third week in December. And I think in most circumstances, like it could have been closed faster, like if I would have pushed the envelope more. Um, but like I said, we met the landowners right off the bat. I mean, we already had like a great immediate connection with the landowners, um, where it wasn't like I didn't have any reason to rush the closing, and I don't think that they were pushing the envelope either. So there was a couple hiccups where it was like title opinion, just getting attorneys, everybody coordinated. But you know,
So
it
it went smooth, but just a little slower than what you guys probably thought.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't it wasn't on time
Yeah,
by any means.
that
Um,
unfortunately happens sometimes. Yeah.
but honestly, it kind of worked out in a way. There is a caveat here. It worked out in a way because interest rates dropped a percent, from
Yeah.
the time of that date to the day of that we actually closed. So the FSA was still at 1.5%, but our interest rate dropped from 7.8 to 6.8,
Yeah.
in that time, which
That's
was
huge.
great.
Yeah.
Um,
You guys could have went to 66. I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
man, it was like, no, but it worked out. What was I going to say though? Oh, one of the things is with the FSA, it gives the current farm was it's half tillable, half timber, and that half tillable, most of it's in CRP. So because it's in CRP, that's a government funded program. The FSA doesn't want to pay for its loans with a government funded program. So like they wouldn't want to use the CRP payments to pay for um, the land payment.
Mhm.
It's just kind of a thing that's like that's not their typical practice. That's not what they want to do. So the stipulation that was on, the approval of the loan was that I would buy out
Mm.
the CRP contract that just went in last year. There's like the CRP is broken out into two different contracts. One's going to expire in 5 years from now, but another one's going to expire like 9 years from now. So in order for them to approve it, we agreed that I would buy out that CRP contract so I could do my farming activities
Mhm.
on
Did
this,
you so you had to buy out
which it works out.
you had to buy out both contracts or just the one?
Just the one,
Okay.
just the one, because it just started. If I had to buy out the other one, it wouldn't have made much sense because how much interest
Accrued over the
built up on it.
yeah, over the probably 10 years with the 5. Yeah. So, yeah, however it shook out. Um, no, that's really interesting. And so what advice would you give to someone that's looking to buy their first piece of ground? I mean, I think you nailed the head on the exploring some FSA options for financing. But what other things can you think of that was maybe something you wish you knew going into it, or something that if someone called you and said, "Hey, I mean, I think I'm going to buy a farm. I know you bought one recently. What advice do you have?"
I would say don't be afraid to explore your options, right? Which like you just said, the FSA, don't get caught up on the down payment amount. Um, and yeah, just to explore your options. I mean, at first, the first like three phone calls I had, right? Like I was under the impression that okay, I have to have 20% down. Like
Hmm.
this is not going to be a thing. Like we aren't going to be able to pursue this. Um, come to find out, that there are other options out there that work to the situation that we were in. Now the circumstances I'm in might not apply to everybody else, um, but definitely explore it and see if it works for you. Because if it does, it can be a huge driving factor for you to make that decision sooner in your life than later.
Hmm.
And it doesn't feel like as much of a burden. It's still a huge life commitment, but one of the big reasons I bought land or we bought land is I've talked to so many landowners, and I've never heard one of them say, "I regret buying this piece of land." I've not. And um, most of the times, like for example, I've knocked on so many doors in my life for asking permission to shed hunt places, deer hunt places, and 95% of the time, 90% of the time, I'll get a no. But that doesn't mean that I'll just stop and be like, okay, nope, I'm leaving. Like sometimes we'll go on a tangent conversation with the landowner, and it'll get to the point of like where we're talking about land, and like I'll be like, a dream of mine's always has always been to buy land, and then they'll be like, there's just a common theme where the landowner goes, the best decision that they've ever made, or they express that the best decision they've ever made was to buy land when they were young. I've heard that so many times from landowners, was to buy land when you're young. Like this that common theme always has that same foundation of a story where like this said landowner took on a huge financial burden, huge financial risk when they were young. They thought it was a dumb decision at first, immediately after they were like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And then they make it through, and they say it's the best decision they've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it goes back to me saying like, I've never heard somebody say that they've regretted it.
Mm-hmm.
All that said, that just all factored into the decision of like why, one of the reasons why that I wanted it, as well as my wife. We had heard that so many times, and then she was in line with what I wanted to do, which was just huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that it is funny how you mentioned that, and it's I love how those conversations natively come up in those conversations too, where they whether however it gets brought up, and they talk about how they bought said ground for what was a lot of money, or what felt like a high price back then, and now both people can go and just chuckle like, you kidding me, you bought that for whatever that price was. And um, I think they kind of, it's like the compounding effect, like if you invest early for your retirement, and like what that could mean, or like the earlier you start, the more it can compound. And I think land is often overlooked, of that same compounding effect is there, and the earlier you start, the more opportunity and potential gain down the road. And obviously you're really diligent on how you did it, and very methodical. And I'm sure you had spreadsheets, and you laid out the different formulas of, if we can get this type of finance and this is our max, it's like it wasn't an uncalculated risk, but it was a risk nonetheless. And I'm super happy for you, and it's really cool to see that happen. And do you think this will be the last piece of ground you buy? I mean, do you have the land bug? I know this is still super, super fresh. You just closed on it a couple of weeks ago, but
Dude. Yeah, no, no, it's a good question, because yes, my dream would be to buy another piece. That's the next dream, right? Like it's not, hopefully it's, but no, I mean, I definitely would love to buy another piece in some point in the future. I mean, I think that we both would, right? To get there, and to get there sooner. Um, we're hoping that, we're exploring some options like we had talked about, before the podcast, with this upcoming startup business launch. Um, hoping that, some of the efforts that we've put towards that will be recognized, and the hard work towards that will continue to be recognized, because yeah, to get to that, buying another piece of land rather relatively quickly, I think it's going to have to be through, um, yeah, a business before our current situation.
yeah,
But
it's a good goal to have, and I'm sure it'll happen. Who knows when it will, but I'm sure it will. And
oh, dude, it's the goal.
I'm excited because we're both going to be in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania here next month. I mean, we're counting down the days here almost. And what do you have going on there? Is it's so the Great American Outdoor Show. We have listeners all over the country here. So what do you have going on, and what booth or what hall will you be in? So if someone listens to this, they can go check out what you have going on. And this is kind of,
Okay.
I feel like I'm prying a little bit, but I think it's still fun to talk about.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, man. So basically, we'll be having a booth. It's going to be for my new startup business. It's called Cat Tracks. The reason it's called Cat Tracks is because we're going to be releasing mobile hunting gear, starting off with our first premier product, which will be the Commando. It's a climbing stick. It's an extremely lightweight climbing stick. To my knowledge, there's nothing out on the market right now that's lighter than this. It's been something I've been working at for the past 3 years. Have finally got comfortable enough to want to bring it to market. Got third-party testing and all this. So we're launching it at the Great American Outdoor Show. It's been a long time coming, something I'm super excited about. And anyways, I started off with saying it's called cat tracks because I didn't finish that. The reason it's called cat tracks, so I thought this was kind of clever, right? Um, Big cats hunt their prey from trees, right? So they
Yeah.
got to climb up the tree to get there. So their claws are going up a tree. So like cat tracks are like climbing sticks, like you're going up a tree. So
Yeah, I like that.
there you go.
I
That's
like
my
that.
little
I like that. Yeah,
yeah.
when you said that, I was trying to think. Okay, so why did he name that? And that was my guess. And that's very logical. And I have to say this. I have to respect. I respect the heck out of this because we were shed hunting 2 years ago, and you just made mention that you were starting this process or you were doing some designs, and you stayed in touch, but haven't had a longer form conversation like this since then. And I just mentioned how's it going. You're like, actually, we're getting ready to launch it. So congratulations to you. That I know that's a lot of work and a lot of dedication to get to this point. And I'm excited to put my hands on the product in Pennsylvania here next month, and I'm sure it'll be a success. And I just have to tip my cap to you because it's no easy project to do that, especially with a product like that with third party testing and people are relying their life on it. And that's really cool. I'm excited for all avenues of your life right now because you're killing it, and I'm really happy for you.
Oh, thanks, Jake, man, and the same goes to you, man. You've been smacking some big deer this year. I'm completely jealous of you, man. That is awesome. I mean,
No,
just doing it from one state to the other.
I had to go to Iowa. I didn't want to leave, but no, you guys have a really special state, and no, I appreciate that. And where can people follow your YouTube channel, and then the business when you have that going? Maybe just follow your social, and they can funnel from there. But feel to share how people can get a hold of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a good way to get a hold of me would be through Extreme Element Outdoors. We've got social media accounts on Instagram, Facebook, and then YouTube. And then basically, I'll be launching some of those links for cat tracks here in the next few weeks, where it'll be to our Facebook, Instagram. I mean, I've got those accounts already created, but they're private. Just because I was just going to release it all at once. But anyways, you'll get those links to be able to reach out through that as well. But you'll be able to find those on the Extreme Element page
Awesome.
or accounts. But Jake, I do want to go back to that one thing right before we got off the land. I
Yeah.
think you brought up something that's really good, and it was a big reason why I bought land. Was I had put like a lot of money into the stock market like over the past 5 years, and I had not seen much change, but I
Hmm.
had seen how land had gone up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's always been a dream of mine to get land. And over the past 5 years, I've saw land prices double. I can tell you my salary did not double over the past 5 years.
Yeah.
So for a first time buyer, somebody who's like kind of waffling on the edge of buying land, if it's within your, if it's something that you truly want to do, there's no better time to do it now if you can.
Hmm.
Just because unless interest rates hit like 22%, we have a farm crisis 2.0,
Yeah.
there's no reason to believe it's going to go down. And so you can consider it an investment if nothing else, but it's something that you would be able to use, have fun with. Um, you know, it's something that is tangible instead of just putting it into the stock market hoping it gets better. Now, there definitely could be potential for more reward with the stock market. I mean, I'm no financial advisor by any means, but
Hmm.
I figured if I was going to lose money or just sit there and watch money be stagnant, um, I'd rather invest it in something that you know is aligned with our end goals,
Yeah.
that being land.
Absolutely, and I think it's kind of invest in what you know, and if you're a land fanatic and it's what you
Exactly.
know and you understand the market, you understand what you could do to improve it. I mean, that's always. Uh, I still put money in the stock market, and I don't like to, and I always think like, man, if this farm comes up, I'm actually going to yank it out, but I never do. And so I'm just building that because I feel like once again the compounding effect. But you're exactly right. You can go out there, you can improve it. I can't do anything to improve the S&P 500. I can't. There's nothing I can do
Yeah.
right here where I'm sitting. So you feel kind of helpless. But I know I can go and improve a parcel, and I know I can go and enjoy it. And I think that's a huge point. And I'm sure even with the farm your dad bought when he like just you guys can probably laugh about it now of like, man, do you remember what you paid for this whole thing? And I'm like, what do you think it's worth today? And it's probably 2 point whatever of multiplier of what he bought it. So I think that's a good indication of that. And it's hard to say what the market will hold, but even with it always comes down like if you can do it now because timing in the market beats timing in the market, and that is the biggest thing. And if land prices did drop 25%, if you didn't have to sell it, it's going to come back and recover. It might take 10 years, but it'll recover. historically, this is not financial advice. Don't take my advice from a podcast, but that's I agree with you there.
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of, I think you summed it up perfect there, man.
Awesome. Well, I hope people go follow what you have going on. I look forward to seeing you in Pennsylvania. Good luck the rest of the season here. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thanks, Jake. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me do this. And yeah, good luck to you as well. We'll see you in Pennsylvania.
Right on.